Morning, everybody. Isn't this a change? Seeing me in the morning and not at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, whatever. I'm Uncle Jack. Welcome to the Jack Shack. Today is a special, for me, it's once in a lifetime. I get to finally do something I always wanted to do, which is pick the brain of a researcher in a field that I'm really interested in. We have with us today researcher with over 25 years field, experience, boots on the ground, in there getting dirty, getting rocks thrown at them, getting roared at, whatever. He's witnessed a ton of stuff, and I'm not going to tell his whole story. I'll let him do it. And with that, we'll let Toad bring us in. And with that, I'm just going to bring him right in. To me, this right here, this is the guy. This is the man right here. What's going on, Mark? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jack. It's good to be here, man.
How's that intro for you, right?
I like it. I like your intro, man. I'm a big guitar guy, so.
I know. We were talking backstage.
Who's on the guitar on that one?
Oh, that is actually something that the second one or the first? The first one, I literally found that on, what is it, Digi or whatever the heck it is. It's some sort of, It's like a ringtone. I'm like, oh, that sounds good. I'll run with it. It's a heavy riff.
It's heavy, baby.
And then the second one, yeah, exactly. Like I said to you before, I love, a lot of your music reminds me of like older bands that I listen to, Godsmack, stuff like that. It's got like that heavy. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but you could add like 10 bands together and just mash them up, and there it is. That's the way I look at it.
It's all my influences.
Yeah. So let's just get right to it, man. Cryptozoology. What is it? How long you been in it, and what drew you to it?
Well, cryptozoology, I didn't even really realize that there was even a fringe science back then. It was like, my family moved to Florida in the very early 80s, and I was exposed to the reality of the creatures in the first week we moved to Florida. There was an incident where the police responded to some horses being attacked, and so we were at the bus stop while that was happening, and they were trying to kill the creature, about 400 yards from us in the back on this barn. Wow. So we were all like in a state of shock that, but then there were the local kids that knew, and they knew they knew this thing was in there, and this is going back. This happened off of Gun Club Road, and actually it was Pioneer Road was where the ranches were, and it was a bordering of a place that they were taking off. So when I was exposed to the creatures at that age, that's when I started looking. So I guess I was around 11, and that's when I looked into it for the first time and started actually reading about cryptozoology. But I was unaware, that anything like this could even, be real. You see something like this on television, and it's like, you don't know what, I'm like everybody else. You don't know what to think, I hear the same stories, and I see the same shows, and then I get the same academic information everybody else gets, that these things are real. That happens this very day. So cryptozoology, I've been around for a long time, practicing and interviewing people. I had my first interview at 16 years old, so technically from all the way back then, but I usually just say that I've been around for around 25 years because that's when I publicly engaged with the subject, right around 25 years ago.
Okay. All right. So how old were you when you moved? And
I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. And when I was like 10, all the steel mills closed. And so we moved to Florida for, job opportunity is what I assumed my family was looking for. But, Florida is very different, and it was very different back then than it is now. Back then,
right.
It was like the developmental boom was in full swing. And it was like kind of the tail end of the initial 1970s rural development of Southeast Florida, and that's when people were running into the monsters, and we were getting reports from police officers down here on a weekly basis, where they were discharging firearms at creatures. But if you go back and you try to look all this information up, it's like they stopped they stopped carrying microfiche, which is how you used to look these things up. You would go to the library and you would look up newspaper articles on a microfiche. And now when you go, it's like all that stuff has been taken out and new history has been put in that's more up to date. Yes. So you can't find anything anymore. It's like the information is systematically over time being removed from the actual system.
I say it all the time. I think they're, erasing our history. They're taking things that were there that, like you just said, we could have been researching, and they're just moving it out. They're taking it from there. They're making it digital, making it easier to wipe it or change it just a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, we could get all into that, but let's talk about when. Hold on, let's take a thing. There we go. Well, that was my second. Well, my second question is basically like the first. What got you interested in it? We already went over that. And when did you have your first sighting experience? Was that the first one when you were at the bus stop? Like, was that it, or did you?
No, we didn't see creatures. We heard the police told us go back down the street. There's a giant hairy monster attacking the horses, and run, and was what he said. The police told us this. So we ran. He was getting a shotgun out. So when those kind of things were happening, it kind of puts a seed in you. You know what I mean? So like I had in the back of my mind for like a long time that these things were here, that they were real. And I was like, not necessarily wanting to run into one. So I would avoid areas like, that were too far out. And we focused on fishing in canals that were on the border of the city, growing up and all that. But I encountered the creatures on several occasions and didn't see them. And that's something that happens more than people, really realize. They just don't understand that that's what they're encountering. And so I had those situations, and I had one in particular in 2012. In which a really large man in the woods that I could not see, it seemed that from the sounds and everything that happened that I woke this individual up. And I had tracked him. I literally found where someone was eating snails, and they were smashing them with a big rock on another rock. And I thought, well, this is probably an otter because it's right at the water. But then I saw where they were digging the freshwater mussels and oysters out, and they had pulled weeds. And then I looked, and there was these two 18-inch punch holes where this thing had been standing there pulling weeds out, getting these things, getting these mussels. And it
that's
just
no otter.
It just seemed so surreal that, it was like right there. And so anyway, I just turned around and looked, and really the simplicity of, and this is something really important, the simplicity of what happens in this encounter has duplicated itself 1,000 times over the last 10 years of hardcore field research. I looked and saw where this animal walked because he leaves big tracks. And I followed his tracks and then encountered him. I just didn't get to see him, but he stood up in those bushes I yelled. I was like, "Raw!" Like, because it was no further. I couldn't go any further. The trail was leading into this really thick bush, and and so I was like, "Man!" And there was a big tree, and it was apparent what happened was when I yelled, he groaned. He was like, "Oh!" And it was like this dude groaned all of a sudden, and I looked over and I was like, "Oh, there's a guy over here," and I just woke him up. Okay, now this is making sense, right? There's a homeless guy eating, right. He's homeless and he can't have any. He doesn't have any food. He's eating these things out of this canal, right? And it's all starting to make sense now. But then I heard him stand up, and he stood up, and it appeared that he was in and under the brush, because when he stood up, he passed through significant amounts of foliage, and you could hear it plain as day. Though there was a tree, and he was obviously, I think it was he was sitting against the tree right on the other side of it, about 18 feet away from me or so. And he stood up and he yelled at me 3 times. And at the end of each one of the vocalizations, which, he was right there, he was mocking me. There was an intelligent human sarcasm, as though he was pissed off that I had the audacity to come into his nap and wake him up. He went, like he was like, it was like a man pissed off that you woke him up drunk. Yeah. And he stormed off. But when he took off, I thought he was coming at me. So I swung around and ran, and swung my cell phone out of my hands, and I ran, and I could hear the bush, and it was being smashed all behind me. And, so I ran, and there was absolutely no way that it was a human being at this point, because the vocals that came at me, I'm bald, but if I had hair, it would have blew it back. It hit me with such a powerful range of frequency that it forced me to have a physical reaction, and that's what ended up happening. And when I slung my cell phone out of my hand, I ran through the bushes. I ran all the way back to my truck, slid across the hood onto the other side, and hit on the wheelbase on the other side, because I was only a couple hundred yards away where I was parked. But then I realized I didn't have any of my things that I left. I left everything, my fishing poles, everything and then my cell phone was in there. So I had to go back, and I went back and I got it, and he was gone. But it turned out he went the other way. But that had a profound effect on me, man. And I was all in at that point. I said, okay, I know they're real. And whatever they're saying on television, these people do not know what's going on. This right here. And this is not cool where it is, because it's people are in here constantly all over the place, regular people. And so that's when I said, okay, I'm going in the field and I'm going to study these creatures, because I know they're real. And so I hadn't seen him yet. 2 years later, I was fishing with a friend, and I was teaching him how to track, and I tracked one, and there were people shooting at it on a swamp buggy, is what we think now. But this thing jumped a trail in front of us, and it was the most unbelievable. I never thought in a million years that anything like this would be possible. And I've seen some crazy stuff in my life, and I found tracks, and I seen tracks, and you know what I mean? But what I've come to realize is there's something wrong with us. And it's only through self-examination in this entire process and looking back that I've come to understand this. We have a profound ability to rely on principles that relieve us of the burden of recognition. And when I say I don't believe that, regardless of what I just saw, I just did that. It's called denying reality. And in this country, it's at an epidemic level. And I recognize this in myself. And that in those early days, that this study that I've engaged in for 10 years could be light years ahead of where it is. And we're pretty far in. But had I not engaged in these behaviors that prevent me from discovering actual truth, and it had a lot to do with learning to research in the field, had a lot to do with learning about myself and how quickly and casually I dismiss all kinds of things that would lead me further into things. And then looking at myself, why am I doing this subconsciously? Then realizing, well, I'm afraid. I'm afraid my life's going to change. I'm afraid other things this could happen, that could happen. What if it's real? All these questions all the time, you know, and it's very easy for us to fall into those states of mind when we're in uncomfortable situations such as this, right? This is a very confrontational aspect of our reality.
Yeah.
And so I had to go through that turmoil of being involved in the subject with a head full of nonsense, first of all, because there's nothing based in reality, because no one's been field researching, right? So when we started to learn things that were directly contradicting what the general public thinks, we instantly were offset and at odds with the general public that concerns themselves with the Bigfoot subject. But I follow the investigation and what the investigation tells me, not what I hear in a Facebook group or on YouTube shows. If YouTube shows tell me to head west, but my tracks are going east, what kind of fool would I be to follow the tracks that don't exist? Right? But this is literally how it works, though. But these ideas people carry into the field, right? And so I had to learn how to get rid of that head full of nonsense first, and then learn how to observe properly, accepting data as it comes for what it is, and continuing the investigation off of that data. It's been an exercise in detachment from what is ultimately the most frightening, experience of my entire life for 10 years straight.
I'm sure. Dude, I'm sure. I wouldn't even know how to react. I mean, I get a dog a little bit bigger than my dozer coming at me off the leash, and I'm freaking out. I can just imagine what it's like to run into something like that that's not supposed to exist. And now here it is in front of you, and it's roaring, and you can feel the you probably felt the vibrations, everything. Like, is there because you hear it all the time in the different witness recountings of their experience, that they could feel the vibration. They could feel it, literally pushing them back. They could feel it goes to your bones. I mean,
yeah, that's real. It's when there are creatures out there that when we began, we were unaware are in this situation. And and some creatures sound like men. They just sound like men. They don't sound loud. They don't seem to have huge, powerful vocals. And then suddenly the same individual will light off a vocalization, and 12 people are frozen stiff. So it's one of these things where they're not always doing that, and that's the shocking part, is they're perfectly capable of what sounds like rational conversation in the bushes while you sit there. And there's two or three of them, and we've sat and listened, and they're having a conversation. Whatever they're talking about, I don't know, but they are having a conversation. I personally
bringing that up
witnessed all this. It's unnerving and psychologically disturbing, first of all. And that's the stuff that, I've had people rip the headphones off and throw them at me and tell me, we got to go now. We got to leave now. This is not okay anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they're coming in closer, and you can hear them crawling, and they're talking to each other. And there's other ones responding in different voices, and people want to
just became real to them.
Yeah. It's like, we don't, as human beings, we've been removed from a lot of information, and where we all like to think that we live in the information age, there's more irrelevant and arbitrary information online than any other kind of information. It has no value intrinsically in our society. And the information that does matter, that teaches us about ourselves, that teaches us how to be better people, that teaches us how to self-examine, that truly teaches us how to critical think, that doesn't exist. You have to search for that, and it's difficult to find. And the reality is, these are the types of things that make the type of human beings that understand that belief in these situations has no place whatsoever. we're dealing with something that's so drastically severe. The coexistence of what is essentially, when it all comes out and it's all said and done, a super predator that far exceeds physical physiology and the capabilities of any modern humans. These are our direct competition for our land sources here in the United States and North America, and really all over the world, because the same creatures we've studied have been reported and documented on every major continent. So we're dealing with something that on the surface seems ridiculous until we start to really look at information that's been held back from us. When we see that in history, thousands of people have seen these same creatures in Europe, but those accounts they didn't have a BFRO. They don't have a BFRO over there. You know what I mean? There's so much stuff going on where the lack of information is concerned, that when people go in the forest and they experience these things, there's nothing there for them to seat themselves in. So when they auto response, which is what we all do, we're drawing from information sources that may or may not be accurate. And a lot of this stuff comes out with a question mark. So there's really no answer. And so in those situations, human beings have a tendency to respond emotionally, where there's no core understanding of what's happening to them. They're instantly in the fight or flight thing. And then we're all, as a direct result, in these situations with no information, developing theories that are based off of E over I, emotions over intellect. We have no critical thinking in these situations whatsoever, because we don't know what's going on. So for us, it was about figuring out what the hell was going on when we were experiencing these things. We knew that there was someone around us in these bushes, and we were having trouble, seeing them. And they were running circles around us, throwing things at us. I mean, we got into many different situations attempting to study these creatures in which we were surrounded by these things and shooting footage the whole time, having things thrown at us. They're whistling pss, 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 to each other from 5 different locations. And the group of us just terrified, knowing full well that we just walked into this situation where these creatures were set up. Why were they set up like that? Why were they sitting equilaterally spaced in a horseshoe formation? And then we come back the next morning and there's 7 deer. There's 7 deer eating in the prairie we walked in.
Right.
So it's like all of these things started to make sense, but over time. And so we started to get away from who we were and what we were thinking about all this, which was like an online version, like some kind of science fiction novel, and get back into this is really what we're seeing. What we're seeing is, if we wanted to trap the deer, we have no weapons. We would need to do things a certain way, man. You know what I mean? And so what we're seeing and what we're witnessing repeatedly is hunting strategies, and human beings fumbling and bumbling and stumbling into the middle of these hominoids in the middle of their hunting strategy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've heard a couple stories like that where they're walking in, they hear something, they start tracking, they get back to a point. And I think it was your story that you were telling me, where you wound up in a kill zone. It was a kill box that you walked into, And,
well, I mean, part of what we do is determine where those activities are going on, and then intentionally insert ourselves into those situations. You can't get them to come to you. You can find their area and then screw around with them while they're in it, but they don't seem to come out unless you do something drastic, in which case, we've had a few instances where individuals would reveal themselves or throw huge rocks. In a couple instances, they reveal themselves right off the bat and let you know, no, this ain't going to fly around here. And, and so, in those situations, we always gave them their space. If there's a creature that can throw a 25-pound rock 60 feet, I don't need to be in that area.
Yeah. And with accuracy too. I've heard a lot of that where, they're just missing the head. They're landing at the feet. Now, you just mentioned something about knowing where they are. So that's that was one of the things that blew my mind. It was so simple and it was out there. Nobody's using it. And I click on your channel and I'm jumping on the Patreon and I'm like, oh, I get behind this. And I start watching, I start learning. Tell me and tell everybody the way you found to find them. Okay. To literally find where they are. And what do you use?
Well, over the course of about 5 years of our study, we, at about that point, we had been in probably 10 different areas. 5 of them, we consistently worked on a weekly basis. So we would make it a point to stop in these areas and run our experiments. And the experiments are all very simple. We do the same thing, sticking to the same trails over and over and over again. And what we started to realize was that in these particular areas, where human trails are concerned, and this is what happens, human beings are routed into the proper trail. If you go into these places, you will be guided to a trail and then told to stay on it. And these are the fundamentals of how the general public continues to not know the creatures are there, because they stick to these same trails. So what ends up happening is the creatures have permanent observation spots within their areas of these trails that human beings primarily stick to. So we're giving them a roadmap of how we use the environment so that they can then build and continue their existence without disturbance. Here's where we are constantly. And what we noticed was invariably the creatures pick the exact same types of areas to be in to observe us, right? There's 3 or 4 different ecosystem changes along this trail that my wife and I walk, but they're consistently in the same 2. Why is that? So we started to look, and what we found was the areas that they frequent all have the same common denominators. There are areas that have very thick canopies and provide low light situations, right? There are areas that with those canopies and low light situations also provide temperature variation, right? Because we're in the state of Florida, we have situations where it can get over 100 degrees, and with 97 to 99% humidity, it's like snorkeling, hiking the trail. You know what I mean? Like the air is so thick you can barely breathe, you know? But there are environments that are a part of the ecosystem, and they're hidden environments. For instance, aside from the fact that canopies can provide these low light situations, they also provide excellent light growth situations for saw palmettos. So what we have is the canopies reducing the light, which reduces the radiation that's hitting anything underneath it, which reduces temperatures. Then we have palmettos that block all radiation. So what we got is underneath the palmettos, a 10 to 12 degrees temperature difference, no matter how hot it is outside. And if you dig down 24 to 48 inches, you're going to start dropping 5 degrees per foot, sometimes even 8 to 10 degrees, depending on the temperature outside, right? It's almost a constant 50 degrees, the earth, if you dig down 48 inches, no matter where you go in the continental United States. So what we're looking at is we uncovered all of this stuff by crawling through the palmettos and encountering creatures while we were crawling that were scurrying out on the other ends, trying to run from us. We saw the complex systems that they dig underneath the palmettos. So we're walking and we don't see anything, and we're hiking. We say Bigfoot isn't real when he's sitting on the palmettos 35 feet from us. And there's other ones watching you walk by. And so what we uncovered was very much the same thing is going on, that like right now, if you look out your backyard window, you're blissfully unaware. And I don't know, where are you living at right now, Jack? Because I want to get to
I'm in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Okay. So you don't have the lizards that run around South Florida in the grass. None of that stuff, right?
No, actually we do. It's the weirdest thing. So in Philly, in Philadelphia, believe it or not, you know those little not the anoles, the geckos, the little geckos?
Yeah.
They're everywhere. During the winter, you find them frozen to the walls.
Okay,
you know what I mean? Like outside buildings. It's crazy.
Well, that's kind of the thing. That's kind of along the lines of what I'm talking about. Here are these lizards. And what I'm trying to say is if you look out in your yard, there's a drama being played out that you're unaware of. you're not able to see into the blades of grass to see that the ants are fighting with one of those geckos right now. Right. This is the same exact thing that's going on in the tree line down the street, man. Unless we're there and we have a camera and we're zooming in on the blades of grass, and then we can get some footage of the ants attacking the gecko. You know what I'm saying? But people aren't doing that, so they're unaware of it. And if I say, hey, I watched some ants eat a gecko in your backyard this morning, it's really not a big deal because we know the ants and the gecko exist.
Right.
People would say, oh, okay. You know, now they know that that kind of stuff is going on in your yard. So here I am, and I'm telling you, those palmettos, it's like that blade of grass thing in your backyard. There's stuff going on in those palmettos, and there are big creatures in those palmettos, big creatures. And it did come down to that. It was like one day it was like an epiphany. I'm like, man, this is exactly like me not understanding that there's a wasp nest on the other side of the tree because my kitchen window doesn't see it. Just because I don't see it doesn't mean it's not going on. And it's up to me to educate myself and take a look, right? And so here I am trying to overcome all of this, crawling through palmettos, hearing these things and hearing them get up. Sometimes they get up and run. And when they get up and run, sometimes some of them appear to be emotionally unstable and they'll scream. Like you would be screaming, running away from one of them. They will scream and run away from you as though you're terrifying to them. It's the craziest thing, man. And I've had it happen. I've had witnesses. We had it happen live on a show one night where this creature had an emotional tantrum that we were there and just ran off screaming while we were live. You could hear it, you know. Now, it's disturbing, all of it.
Bringing that up, I've heard it from different researchers. It's been thrown out there that possibly these creatures are, you know, maybe on the spectrum, you know, possibly autistic. The way they stand there and they look at you and they sway back and forth, it kind of relaxes them. And then you bring that up, like they're running away. And I said it the other night when I had a couple people on, a couple different podcasters, and we were discussing it, that's been brought up. And I asked if people in the chat and, you know, and go, hey, do you have anybody here have any in the family? You know, anybody have any autistic kids in the family? You know, how they, you know, react and all. And the one guy's like, yeah, I didn't even think about it, you know, and when I explained exactly how it was and the similarity, you know, it's wild. And what are your thoughts on that? Do you know, subscribe to that they are possibly autistic, and that, you know, that could explain some of the things they do?
Sure. I mean, they're subject to the same toxicities that we're subject to. We don't have enough information about the species publicly available that we can, you know, get into that. But I have seen behaviors that, like this one that I'm talking about that screams and runs off, has been doing it for 10 years. And I've stated in year one that if we're around when this thing gets bigger in, you know, 20 years or something, what is this thing going to do, being that it's emotionally unstable, right? And so we have serious questions about all of it because we're the ones going in there. And you know, it's like, I look at the autism factor, and there are several different researchers who have demonstrated correlations, and Christopher Noel is one of them. He's done some really interesting work on that. I think, you know, I think that what we see is very simple gesture communication. And I think that boredom, and I mean, we're dealing with things that sit around in the woods. Let's think about how entertaining the woods are. Once you've been there for a week camping, how entertained are you? You know what I'm saying? So if you're growing up in these situations and you're living in these wild situations, we're dealing with something that, by all accounts and from everything we've experienced, is fully self-aware. And their intelligence, especially their emotional intelligence, appears to supersede you know, what we see typically in modern humans, right? We can see that a group of humans can be manipulated to a frothing frenzy in a crowd like this. But we've been studying crowds of these things for 10 years. and they are in a crowd. They're in a group. When they're around, it's not one. It's not how it works. There are these groups of them, and there's small ones and there's old ones, and we've caught these things on film, and you can see all of that in the footage. But the way I look at it is they have a worse time with the toxicities because specifically we study in the catchment areas. So we're in the areas and getting the diseases that they must be exposed to. I recently just acquired Lyme's disease. This is something that is, talked about online as being manufactured or man-made. It's doctors still to this minute refuse to accept that the Lone Star tick is giving people a form of Lyme's disease. And yet that's mainstream doctors. And yet doctors are getting it themselves because there are rural area doctors who have to deal with things in the woods. And so they get ticks. And so they have the Lone Star Lyme's disease, just like me. And it wants to kill you, this form of Lyme's disease. I can't eat meat anymore. My whole life has changed as a direct result of the illnesses that I've caught from being exposed. My wife and I both had amoeba. We were exposed to amoeba as a direct result of spending thousands of hours in these flooded catchment areas. So we know the diseases and the toxicities are present. We know that the creatures are exposed. We have a lot of questions regarding how that is affecting these creatures. Is this thing that certain researchers talk about where autistic behaviors are being witnessed a direct result of the neurotoxins that are being put in our water supplies? We have over 6,000 golf courses in the state of Florida, man. Every one of those is going through 100 gallons of 3 different pesticides a month. And it's all being washed off into the catchment area just outside.
Oh, yeah.
The neurotoxins and the plant weed killers and all the things that golf courses have used in the state of Florida are absolutely in these environments. Like I said, I can testify to antibiotic resistant infections. I can testify to amoebas. I can testify to Lyme's disease. They're still trying to figure out what one of our infections is, and being, spider bites. And there's a million different things. What does this do to the wild hominoids that don't have any kind of medical care, or, you know what I mean? I mean, these guys don't use soaps. They don't use chemicals, none of that stuff. So there's a gambit of how does this environment affect them when we're poisoning it on a daily basis and with the volumes of toxins that we're dumping,
Right. So we're literally poisoning the water that they're drinking, poisoning the environment that they're living in. If they're eating the plants or the roots or something,
sure.
they're
human beings are, I think the new statistic is 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 are suffering from autism now. Births.
Yeah.
Of human beings. So where are we at in the wild hominoid population? Well, people don't even think they exist. You know what I mean? But in the end, it's like we're trying to find those things out. We're learning how to study the creatures, getting closer to the creatures. And, I hope that, we can get more answers before, whatever's going on with our country and with the planet and everything. I mean, with what we know, just looking at the geological instabilities that North America is staring at right now, there are some frightening equations in all of this that are going really undiscussed and unrecognized. What we know to be real can have a profound impact on modern human beings, us. If there were cataclysms, all that has to happen is fresh water disappear in the state of Florida. And we're going to learn real quick that wild hominoids are real, that giant creatures with hair all over them that are ugly looking, trollish looking things are real. When they run out of food, when they run out of water. And so we're all being forced into these situations. Where does it go from here? I think when you ask questions about autism and all that stuff, I think that's relevant, as ridiculous as that sounds. But looking at how we've been doing every other species of wildlife, look what's happening in the Florida Keys. Fish are dying and acting all weird, swimming upside down and in circles. Giant sawfish are beaching themselves, all this crazy stuff. Hundreds of different species of fish are acting weird and dying in the Florida Keys right now, and nobody can explain it. Nobody. There's all kinds of stuff going on. I read a report 2 weeks ago that in Martin County, which is the county I live in, which is the county with all the creatures in it that we've been showing you, you have to desalinate your well water. There's an order now that the well water has been tainted by salt water. The ocean is coming in.
Yeah.
It's putting pressure on the aquifer that's underground in Florida, forcing species out of their normal habitats because their water hole is now salty.
Right.
What happens when that happens as things increase, and science tells us that this will domino? We will eventually realize these things that we're talking about today as a society here in America.
Now, another question, and a lot of people in the chat, some people have, they're very familiar with your work. Other people, maybe they are, maybe they've seen Finding Bigfoot, or they've seen, maybe the original Patterson Gimlet, the Patty. I'm pretty sure 98% of the people watching or going to watch the video have no idea about wildlife management areas and the management of these creatures. Tell us, in your experience, what have you found as far as management areas, feeding, keeping people out, keeping people safe, moving these creatures around? How do they do it? I mean, like I said earlier when we were backstage, ignorance is bliss. A lot of people just don't know. First thing I do is I start talking about it, and they just look at you like UFOs. The same thing. What is the stigma with UFOs? It used to be as soon as they look at you and you say, I saw a UFO, they go, you're drinking, you're high, haha, feed it. I don't believe you. You have no idea what you're talking about. They laugh at you. They say he should be locked away. He's crazy. Now the government's coming out and saying, yeah, they're here and we can't catch them and we don't know what they are.
Yeah.
Now, with these creatures, same thing. I come out and say, I had an experience. And what's everybody's first thing? Oh, you were drinking, or, oh, when you grew up, you loved them monster movies. That's what made you think that. No, we were made to believe that these things are fairy tales and they don't exist. Explain what you found being in there all these years. You go in one day and you deal with something and you see something, you come back the next day and the whole environment's changed. And how do they do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, they don't like you. It's become obvious from the harassment that lately it hasn't been because we've been doing things differently. But in the beginning, I just thought it was a question of, we're allowed to be in these areas and I'm not shooting at anything. I'm using a camera. You know what I mean? I don't even carry a firearm, just 4 cameras in a bag with batteries in it. So we were deeply offended when we started to get harassed. And when we saw that we would put a film out and certain people knew where the location was, having stopped and harassed us, we would go back in the areas on fire. We started to see this on a regular basis where we put a film out and our research area is burning down 4 days later. And one time we went there and we found a really long trackway where like 4 individuals had transited from one section of forest to another across this prairie. And it was the most beautiful trackway. To this day, I've never seen anything except for the one that Barrickman found in the mud over there in the Pacific Northwest, like 10 years ago or something. It compared to that, the tracks were running through gelatinous mud. It gave us a chance to view 4 different hominoids tracks and a toddler as well through 100 different densities of substrate and what their feet look like, how the track changes, And we went to go cast those tracks the next day, and the FWC was running them over and actively looking down, steering the swamp buggy to make sure he. And we just kind of stood back, and we're looking at each other, and, we at that point started to, understand what was going on. So me, if I know that there's someone against me, man, I'm going to confront him. I'm that guy. And so every chance I get, from that point forward, to talk with one of these people and get what was going on, I tried to stop and talk with them. Like, what are you guys doing about this? And so eventually, when we had more than enough evidence, including hair and DNA, and I witnessed the guy eating at the trap, you know what I mean? I saw him, I was like seeing this thing, and there's the trap with the lid off, and he's eating out of it with his fingers. You know what I mean? We got you, man. It's done deal.
Yeah.
I went to government department that concerns itself with regulating these areas, and it was the denial crew. You know what I mean? They had biologists in there. They were prepared, and they knew who I was, and they denied everything. But it was interesting because during one aspect of the interview, when I was talking about how I go after the creatures to catch them on film, one of the biologists almost came out of his seat as though he had a personal stake in researching the creatures or something, because I had to stop him because he leaned forward in his seat and he was about to say something. And so anyway, I got out of it what I needed to get out of it. And I'm sure they got whatever they needed, because they eco-engineered 4 of our research areas after that meeting. They had construction crews in there, changing entrance ways, putting signs up that you can't enter this particular area anymore, doing this over here. They literally took a trail that had a curve in it and removed the curve so that you can see all the way down the trail from the street, so that the FWC officer doesn't have to get out of his truck to see if somebody's in the Bigfoot research habitat. They've stopped us numerous times on the way out. They're arbitrary. There's never anything done or said. It's more about, we're watching you. We've been identified, the cat's eye on the front of their trucks on dozens of occasions, parked in bushes. I've got thermals, man. I have military grade equipment, man. You're not going to hide. You know what I'm saying? Unless you're wearing one of these new suits or something that, hides you from thermal. But I mean, we've recorded these people in situations that are extremely compromising in their activities of management. One particular area, I was shocked to see that it's a wildlife management area where people can hunt and hike and do all this stuff. And they're releasing Brahma bulls. You've got tagged cattle being released in a wildlife management area. Tagged cattle. And so when we see that the cattle are released in this area, I start looking for where the bones are. And we find killed cattle bones everywhere, man, where the skulls are missing, the horns are missing, but just dozens of hip bones and leg bones and back bones are everywhere, all through this whole area. And we show them on footage, and then 2 weeks later, it's after the film's out, the bones are all gone from the prairie. All the spots were empty. So we're watching management in its attempt to kind of clean up its loose ends. And we've had plenty of examples of that, and had plenty of eyewitnesses with us to witness this. At one expedition, I pointed out a tunnel system in a cabbage palm head that was, 70, 80 feet from a parking lot. And 4 days later, we went in to shoot the film, and they had only burned that head. That was it. They just set that head on fire. And it's interesting because they have cameras all over the parking lot. You know what I mean? And so we see what goes on. We see the, the intent behind what goes on. I've literally had these people set fire to my research area while I was in it, blocking my retreat to go to my truck. So I had to find a new way out because they were burning me out. This is the kind of stuff. They don't even care. My truck's parked right there, and they're burning like 20 feet from my truck. This is the kind of stuff. And furthermore, here you go. How about endangered species, right? We've literally witnessed them burn to death dozens of gopher tortoise trying to burn out.
Yeah,
Dude,
that's protected
you can't even
species.
touch a gopher tortoise. If you
Yep.
touch it, it's a felony. And
Mhm.
they're killing dozens of them, trying to keep the hominoids back from coming closer to these parking lots and to these hiking trails. So they burn out the areas that the creatures use, and you'll find patterns on this because there are plenty of areas that are in much dire need of artificial burn. Why would you burn an island? It's surrounded by water. What, the fire's going somewhere?
Yeah.
Give me a break, man.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
like none of it makes any sense. Oh, except for the fact that we've been filming Bigfoot and tracking him in there for the last 3 months and put 3 films out.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so this is what we see when this many times goes by, and it happens every single time, and you start to do things different, and then it doesn't happen. So I conceal where I'm researching. I stop telling people. I don't put it in the films, and it ends. There's no more harassment. Nobody knows where I'm going. Nobody knows when I'm going. Nobody knows anything about what we're doing anymore, and all the harassment disappears.
Now I remember when you had first put that out there, and I guess it was a couple months after you decided to not tell people and put the stuff out later. And then you had an issue where you had one clearly right in front of you stand up, and you were ready to, snap the photo. And all of a sudden, the obligatory, orb shows up directly in front of the camera. Camera malfunctions, and you catch something else. And that right there, that's the nail in the coffin that, it's being managed. The entire thing is being managed. It's being kept hush hush. We're not allowed to know. And why? If it's okay to burn an area and almost kill a human being and kill off endangered species that we're not allowed to walk over and roll over if they, or on their back, on their shell, we're not even allowed to save them, but they're allowed to, burn the damn things. What is so important? Why can't we know? Why can't we know about something that can possibly kill us? I mean, literally, these things come out of the bush from not far from where I live. They come out of the bush. They will decimate this area. I don't care. The size that these things can get. And this is the other question, which I would love you to go through the story about when you were driving down the road and you caught the one running next to you, and then you saw the other piece of technology, or no, I don't know if you saw it or you felt it, and then the truck shuts down, and it was wild. Yeah. Why? And it's all caught live on camera.
Yeah. We had planned that camp out for 2 months, and so we had advance notice. And this is typically, like I said, when the public has advance notice of where we're going to be, we can count on opportunities to document camera interference, right? Electromagnetic, RF frequencies, all of these things. When we're broadcasting that we're going to be there, just bring your tri-field meters, man. You know what I mean? And bring cameras that are hardened so that you can film all of the other cameras, the real expensive ones, being damaged, harmed, and all that stuff, because that's what happens. We plan to camp out. We go out. We've got people that were educating in the field in real time. There were several instances where I was tracking in real time, and then we caught creatures on film from the track, right? So we had all of this going on. Well, I was in my truck with Melanie, and we were driving along, and I think we were actually on day 1 trying to film gators. And this area has some really big dinosaur alligators, man. 14, 15 footers can be in this area sometimes. And at the time of year, they'll get into fights with each other, and it can be really great footage. You know what I mean? There's huge bull alligators all trying to get like 6 females. You know what I mean? And so there's this big fight, and we're trying to catch this on film. So we're driving down this back road, and I got my window down looking out, and I don't know if we had just left the gators or we were looking for them, but I end up seeing this huge bulky thing like running, man, and he's on the other side, and when he's running, you can literally see where he's doing this like this, where his back is like boom, 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 and I'm going like 25 on this dirt road, and this thing is like keeping pace, and I see him through the canopy. I slammed on my brakes, and the truck behind me slams on the brakes. Everybody gets out. We run over there, and we all start shooting. And I'm trying to say, like, look, I just literally had a sighting. Film here. And we catch one of the creatures in the bushes right there. And is it the one? I don't know. It's really big, though. And,
Right.
and of course, it's, difficult to make him out. And it's all this, it's real time. And he's ducked down. And he's trying to watch us, right? We caught him. The next morning, we got up, and I had a day planned where I was going to teach a couple different subjects. And one of our campers said, why don't we just go over there where we saw this thing, And I was like, I'll have to cancel what we were going to do, but that's not a bad idea because it's a live investigation. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
So we went over there, and it was the weirdest thing. When we pull in, it for some reason, and I know the time of day that we were there was afternoon, and it was like the morning, but for some reason, it just did not seem like the area. And I kept saying it. I don't know if this is the spot. I don't know if this is the spot, But I walked across this little land bridge, and I went down into it, and everybody was behind me, and we spooked a huge gator. It was right on our left side, and I mean huge. It was on land, and so he made a huge ruckus going in the water, and everybody was behind me was startled, and so we already had now this tension, and there was a little corner in the trail, and I just took a few more steps, and I told everybody to come up high off where that gator slide was. So they came up high, and we all rounded that corner, and that's really the last thing I remember. There was a huge rock in the ground, and I walked across it. It was a big flat rock after the gator, and I turned right, and the next thing I know, I have my camera has a handle, and I'm looking at my hand, and I'm thinking, where's my camera? And I didn't know where I was. I couldn't find my camera, and I had a story apparently about two women took my camera who were wearing red backpacks. And my wife is like looking at, I can just remember this is like what I remember telling people that were standing around me suddenly, because I was standing at my truck and couldn't explain what was happening, that my camera is gone and I don't know where it is, but I think these two women took my camera. And so I don't know what happened. I just know when I reviewed the footage, here's what actually happened. I turned that corner and I walked up ahead of the group. The group stayed back about 20 feet from me and then started to move. I know this because in the original footage, I turn around and I look and they're coming. And at that point, I was reviewing the footage and I saw that as I came up to this pine tree, this little thing, like a bug, zipped past the screen near my ankles, which really isn't much of an occurrence because moths and all this stuff fly around. And for the most part, I dismissed that. It's all, it's a bug. But the last frame before it went, it looked like it had a green light on it, man. And I went, what is this? And I zoomed in on it, and I got clear frames of what is a little device that's about this long, and it has a green light on one. It has running lights, like no kidding. It has green and red running lights.
Yep.
One on each end. There's a strip of light, and it looks like a tube of chapstick, but it flies in circles so fast that you can't see it with your human eye. You'll catch when the sun gleams off of it sometimes, and we have on several occasions, and I have eyewitnesses who have, right when my camera was shocked and the battery was killed. A big flash of light. I'm talking about right in front of my camera, in the middle of a prairie, huge flash of light, and my camera's dead. Now, I was looking through the Oculus and didn't see the flash of light, or, if it happened so fast, I didn't see it in between frames possibly, but the witnesses saw it. But in this footage, this device is there. It's around my ankles. It comes up and flies in front of the tree, and I broke it all down in slow motion so you can see this thing is moving all by itself, and it then goes into the forest and comes back out in front of the camera, and that's when I stop it and we get the best look. But right then, the Bigfoot creatures are within 20 feet of me, and
Yep.
there are these orbs. And one of them, literally, as this device comes in front of my camera, one of the orbs goes against gravity and jumps up about 12 inches and blocks my shot. And it's plainly seen in the slow motion video. I think I maybe even make note of it. So at this point, the memory lapse, the I lost time, starts making sense with me, right? I'm looking at what's causing it. Right then, my camera dies. Like this thing, that was like the very end of the footage. When that orb comes up and that thing jumps across like that, I turn my camera and that's it. My camera's dead. So within a second of that occurrence, my camera went down.
So
there's no more footage. And I can't explain to this day where my camera was, even though I own it to this day and it's still here. It ended up that my camera, how it got here, I don't know, but it was on the back of my tailgate. Subsequent conversations with one of our camp members said that when we got back to the truck, and I hadn't spoken to him yet, that's why the whole freak out was happening. But he said that he saw two girls with red backpacks leaving a different part of the trail, and that I wasn't hallucinating because I thought I lost time and I'm having hallucinations about people. You know what I mean? And you can't explain these things. This is the part that for 25 years it avoided us. We've had our cameras jammed 100 times. In fact, it was one of our experiments for almost 12 months. I documented that one camera with a zoom lens on it was the only camera that got jammed every time we went in the field. I filmed it over and over and over again. I'm leaving the truck with a new battery. Bam, dead. Turn around, go back to the truck, film the whole thing, put the new battery in, 170 minutes on the battery, show it on the screen, turn around to walk away from the truck. My camera gets zapped, turn around, put another battery in, like 5 times in a row. If I leave the truck without that camera, nothing happens. I mean, what's going on? You know, it's about the zoom lens. That's the camera that consistently gets whacked. It's got a zoom lens on it. The iPad, we've had it maybe go down once. It's encased in metal. The Osmo, which I recommend because it's on a gimbal. Osmo is an excellent camera for shooting in the field or anywhere. The Osmo that we have is one of the originals. It's also aluminum. It doesn't seem to be affected as drastically as, say, my $3,200 Canon. You know what I mean? Like I can't carry that thing with. If I tell somebody I'm going to be in this place on next Friday and I bring that camera will be zapped and it won't work. But if I don't tell anybody or if I misdirect and I go somewhere else at the last minute, I can shoot all day with that camera.
That is insane.
So as long as nobody knows where I'm going, my cameras work fine.
So let me ask you, if they can do that, whatever this technology is, these mini drones, these little insect-looking things, which, yeah, I mean, if you have eyeballs and you've been on the internet, everybody's seeing, well, the drones are this big and they're little gnats and they're watching us and it's the FBI and it's this and it's that CIA and blah, blah, blah. Well, now somebody has proof of it and it's damaging your equipment, all right, or it's, making it fail. What's it doing to the human body at the same time? Now, you have a momentary, lapse of memory. You have no idea what happened. You get bits and pieces. Maybe it's real foggy. You start to put the story together when other people are telling you this, and that, and you had your camera, and then you show up and it's sitting on the tailgate. It kind of makes you, like, think it's that Men in Black shit where they wipe the memory. What if this has been happening to all kinds of people? Just out there in the woods, just walking, see something they shouldn't, wipe the memory, turn around, boom. Sure. It's not like they have to walk up with the pen and go, boop, look in here. They can.
I'll tell you,
operate.
There's definitely something, and I don't know that it has anything to do with it, but 9 months ago, I had a cancer screening and I was clear. 3 months later, I was feeling really bad. And this was after all of this stuff going on that we just talked about. And I got diagnosed with lung cancer. So, I just spent the last 7 months curing lung cancer. And it's not I have had to think about things like, there's been other things, my partner and his accident. There's been a lot of different things, but I don't dwell in that. And it's like one of those things where, if something like that is going on, really, what control do we have over it? Right. It ultimately comes down to cause and effect, and it cause happens before we have a chance to react. So I look at these situations in like a more matter of fact way. And I understand that they say this all the time. We're a nation of laws, right? So if people are going to do things like that and do things that are unconstitutional, they are the ones that are breaking the law. And I try to keep that in mind, that ultimately what we are is, we're trying to bring a more accurate representation and understanding to what's going on in this particular subject and with this particular species that everybody knows is real at this point, right? I mean, the bottom line is how many people have to come forward, whether they're judges, lawyers, doctors, and if you don't like any of those, we got politicians. If you don't like politicians like me, then how about your mom? How about your sister? Because every one of these people that have seen these things is somebody's mom, somebody's sister, somebody's brother. They're people just like us, right? They have lives, they care. Why would they want to say something like this when it didn't happen? It's ridiculous.
Why would they want to get ridiculed? Why would they want to put themselves out there?
We're talking about traumatic occurrences. And when you interview enough people, you get this. You get it. Trust me. And the lengths that people will go to try to get you to understand what they've seen when you've seen it yourself. They just are adamant and hey, you're not listening. And I'm like, no, I am listening. In fact, I wrote everything down that you just said. No, but you're not getting it. It's actually real. I saw it. And it's like they keep going on and on and on and on. You know what I mean? It's like, man, what did this person see? And it's 10 years later and they've been researching for 10 years.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yep.
That's me. This is not a joke. It's very serious.
Yep.
So, I appreciate the questions, we don't typically get these types of questions, and I think they're relevant, very relevant.
Yeah, I think yes, they are. And they got to be out there, and that's one of the other things is me just being, a regular Joe or Jack or whatever you want to call me on the street, my mind and my eyes were opened years ago to this particular topic. I had my own run-in, and I couldn't even believe it. I was in Delaware, of all places. Up the street from the house at the man-made, pond, where we would go down and feed the turtles. And we were just standing there. Well, before that, I found these little stick structures, and I never put much into them. And then when I found them, they were small. They were like, I have pictures I could send you. You can tell me if they look like, just ridiculous or if they actually are something. But where we were, we were standing on it's like you got them big cement blocks and we put them all together and it kind of blocks the water in and it keeps it up the other end. It could run over a little bit here. And then in the back, you got all them big, foliage and the thicket. It's like right there. So it's real hard. You can't get through. You can't get back there. And if you did, you'd have a hell of a time getting out. You're in mud this deep, We're there for about 20 minutes, and I kept hearing something, and it just didn't feel right. And I'm just tossing fish pieces out to the turtles for feeding snappers. And all of a sudden, I don't know if it was as big as when, Mr. Kreider ran into his big one, but this was big enough to scare the shit out of me. And my ex was with me at the time. She ran as soon as it happened. It was like an explosion in the bush, and it just took off, and you hear the sticks and the cracking and the breaking and the branches. And I'm thinking about it. The area you have the pond, you have the wall here we're standing on, you have this area back here, which really wasn't that big, and it's surrounded by homes. Where did it go? or is it still there, but you just can't see it? And why is that? What's the reason why I'm looking over at a tree and there's an 8-foot, hominid with 600 to 800 pounds and I can't see it? I told her, I lied. I said, that was like 5 deer. You're fine. Come on, come back. And then I stayed there for like 2 minutes and I couldn't take it. I had to leave. I took off. But why is it that when we're looking directly at them during the day, during the night, what is it? I mean, you hear it compared to Predator. They say, yeah, you see the videos of the Glimmer Man or Shimmer Man or whatever it's called in the woods where you basically see this. It's just movement. There's no rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah.
So what is it? And a lot of people will say, oh, they're spiritual or they're this or that. It's paranormal. I think there's a more common, reason and answer for it. I think it's all physical.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know that I was blind. That's, the reality is, about year 7 of our study, we had already tied a lot of different sciences to what we were seeing on the film, but it was about year 7 when I read the study about human vision that human beings only see less than 1/2 of 1% of all available light. And I thought about that. We're not getting 99% of the information that a pigeon gets about the world we live in, right? So what does the world look like? I asked myself, what does the world look like to a pigeon, right? Because he has 4 cones, we have 3, right? Our vision is antagonistic, and there's an interesting, everything is correlating to the existence of these creatures, which is frightening. We're blind to the fact that diffusion is colored light. What is diffusion, right? Okay. Everywhere the sun hits, if it hits directly, it's not diffused. Whatever it hits, it's diffusing off of, right? Diffusion happens when sunlight hits something, right? And it's being diffused in different directions. But what human beings don't realize is that when it hits something, sunlight can pick up the colors of what it hits. And we don't realize that because we can't see that light. So as it changes colors, it goes off in every direction and it hits something 10 feet away and it casts a slight color change from picking up some of that cement sidewalk that's white on a green power box. And that edge of the green power box is lighter than the dark paint on the right-hand side of it. Is evidence that we don't see all of this light, right? And so what happens when sunlight hits the forest? Well, a lot of plants are not exactly reflective, not exactly opaque, not exactly translucent, but they're somewhere in between. And a lot of plants will let light through. So light can pass through to certain degrees, some of these plants, but when it does, it picks up those colors. We walk through and see green plants with our 0.5% of all available light being seen. But what's really there is a whole forest full of colored light. Trees are blocking that colored light in vertical stripes all through that forest. Trees cast shadows. And where that shadow goes depends on whether there's a vertical for it to hit. So if it's just flat ground, the shadow lays across the ground, right? Right. But if you step into that shadow, it goes up your face. Mm-hmm. Correct? Does the same thing to them, except you are colored and they're not. Black is not a color. It's the absence of color. White is not a color. It's the absence of color. All the shades in between, all those grays and all those dark or lighter shades of gray and the darker shades of gray all the way to black, those are colorless. And therefore, they receive and retransmit diffused colorations. This is what human beings don't understand about their reality. Those creatures are hiding in light that already exists that we can't see. It's not cloaking. They're simply walking through light. The same way When you walk through it, the light affects you, except if you were colorless, like a blank. That's why canvases are white. They receive and retransmit color more vibrantly, more powerfully. Now, I've painted on plenty of black canvases, don't get me wrong, but there's a reason we use a black canvas, right? Specifically. And I have other ideas about colors that I'm going to be using on that black canvas, right? So these studies in light are what actually, and really studies into human limitations, are what actually started to reveal more about the creatures to give us a greater ability to document them. Once we realize, okay, this isn't, science fiction, man. This is the same thing that happens to a bonefish in the Florida Keys when I'm pulling behind him. I'm watching the gray ghost as he swims across that little shallow white sand flat, and he changes colors constantly, blending in with the sand, the diffused light changing from surface tensions, whether there's wind on the surface and it's hitting his light and it's swirling all over his back, making him vanish in that sand. But see, I know what the optical illusion looks like in the shape of a fish. So I'm not chasing a bonefish. I'm chasing that optical illusion. It's the same concept in our research. Once we determined that diffusion was hiding the creatures, we learned that it's diffusion we're hunting. It's the retransmission. So when the creatures are in there, they retransmit. When they retransmit, sometimes the sunlight is so powerful that hits them, they produce shades of color that the camera has trouble understanding in its digital software. These are very simple, very scientific explanations for exactly how people come up with terms like pareidolia, because they don't understand cameras, diffusion, or retransmission off of achromatic. There's literally a term. It's called achromatic aberration. The aberration causes a blur that people have coined blob squatch.
Yeah.
We at the reality know full well that you can't have a blob squatch without a squatch. They're colorless. The retransmission, the blur, is evidence that there's a retransmission happening. So we've come full circle in the research as a direct result of beginning to study how human beings are limited in our understanding of ourselves.
How many different kinds are there? You got the ones like you have your patty, okay, which doesn't look like, it doesn't look the same as what we're seeing in some of your footage. We see some of them with faces that look like they have a mohawk. We have some that look like a Cro-Magnon man, some that look like, Native American. And then you have other ones that they're saying they're dogs or hyenas or whatever. What's the difference? How many are there? And as far as cryptids go, how many have you researched that you can, that you've videoed or have, been in the presence of, say your dog man, your Bigfoot, whatever. How many are there, and, what can we expect as far as, with more discoveries that are coming? And we all know it's eventually it's going to come out. It's going to, one of these days they'll be doing a press conference on the White House lawn, and one of these things is going to walk out and pick up the president, walk away, or something. So just like the UFO landing, at that same press conference, and a squatch comes out and whatever. Something like that, like just happened in Florida, like just happened in, I believe it was Peru. Something like that is going to happen on the main stage, and it's not going to be hidden. Whether it be today, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it's going to happen. It's already It's already happening more and more. Like when we were talking on the phone last week, I had stated that I had 4 instances where I had an experience where I saw lights in the sky. I was alone twice, and the other time people were with me. I have the video. I have the still photos. It was during it. I'm talking. I'm freaking out. I'm going, oh my God, it's a triangle, And when you go through it, you go, oh, I'll send you. It's actually funny because you hear me talking, and I'm my Philly accent, and I'm like, there's something up there. That thing's big. That's fucking big. It's a fucking triangle. And I swear to God, I started crying. It was like one of them moments where you can't, all your, like, I can get what you say about your first time experiencing one of them. I could just imagine, man, I would shit myself. It's like all your emotions come through. You can't control it. You just can't. It's something that, maybe you knew years ago. You go, yeah, they're definitely real. And people are like, no, no, no. Like I said, ignorance is bliss. If they don't know about it, you don't have to worry about it. If you don't know about something that is 30, 40 yards from you while your kids are on the swings, you're not worried about it.
You have that luxury.
Yes. Now, if it's something that you know about, black bear, cougar, something like that, that the wildlife, management that they're telling you about, they give you flyers, they give you things like bear spray. What are they giving us to protect us from them? Nothing. It's amazing.
It's interesting because when you look at, like, when this first probably hit the decision makers, they're like, well, you tell them like it's a bear. And then one guy said it. He said, they're hiding from us. Why we got to tell anybody anything?
Yeah.
Just don't say anything when people report it, because that's really don't say or do anything. Don't respond, because in the end, bears are coming out and into our communities on a regular basis, but Bigfoot aren't doing that. These hominoids don't do that. Right. They don't want anything to do with us. They're indifferent in every way. In fact, they object when you're there. So it's like, you're coming into my house, get out. And it's like one of those things where they're trying to give us our space, but we keep expanding, and along the lines of, the different types of stuff and all that. What I've come to, what's been coming across my mind lately after the things that I've been seeing is, there's a myth that, the now has nothing to do with ancient times. And that's really what I've learned, is that there's a myth, and we live in the Old Testament and don't know it. These things are real. They're out there. The creatures that were talked about a long time ago in history by native tribes here on this continent are with us to this day. There is no getting around this. And that's one of the reasons we approach it the way we do. It's like, you can struggle all you want, but all you're going to do is struggle out of one diaper and put on another one. The reality of this is you can't run from this. They're outside your town. When your leaders set up your town back in the day, whenever that was it 1800? Was it 17 something? Who knows? They had to contend with these things.
Yep.
If you cut bush down, you have to contend with these things at some point. And in the end, this is, I think the foundation of the lies in America. The existence of the hominoids, you can't get around it. They're our only competition. The fact that they have no technology does not mean that at some point they will not stand up and let themselves be known. What we see from personal encounters that are deliberately orchestrated repeatedly to see what they're going to do is that at some point when you push things, they reveal themselves and they object. So what's to say on a mass scale they won't do the same thing in certain areas at some point, because they've demonstrated individually in these groups that they will object to you if you continue like disrupting their existence. Like, one of the aspects of what we do is when we realize that they're in this particular spot, we start to learn the topography as quick as possible. That takes incursion and several incursions and real close examination. They get real uncomfortable during those. That's when the rocks get thrown. When you're poking around near their structures too much and you're in there 3 days in a row, somebody's going to say something to you. This isn't a question of there's never any evidence. There's never any occurrences. These things are interacting with us when we're in the forest. And it's like real simple. That's one of the reasons we bring people with us, because when they leave, they can tell people, no, this is happening. This is that we were like, I saw this thing through the thermal. It's right there, or we approached it on camera. Like, we like to bring people with us because we find that invariably we're going to get I have trouble with this concept believing, right? And so the data is what shows what reality is. And here's the thing. If that wasn't the case, we'd have never caught another creature on film, because trust me, that stuff they're talking about, pareidolia, that's what I've been using for my research. I've been examining nothing but that for almost 10 years and figuring out that it's actually the creatures and their retransmission. So when I realized that they were doing that, I realized how to catch them on film. When I realized how to catch them on film by identifying that this blur thing was like happening in real time. We're standing there and I'm looking at a bush. I can see it's 60 yards away. It's 12 feet tall. I can see the leaves perfectly fine. And yet somehow there's a green fog filling the bush in. And at the top, I got a forehead.
Yeah.
It's the retransmission. So I'm seeing one of the creatures. So I start shooting throughout the course of the 1 minute clip out of 60 frames per second, 1800 frames for 1 minute. I get 70 frames showing the exact symmetry of what's standing there. But the world will take the other 1,000 blurry frames during the retransmission and act like somehow that's the evidence. I can't change that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And in the end, when cameras are manufactured to accommodate a 4-cone vision system, and we're able to see all available light, we'll all get to see these creatures the way they're actually intended to be seen, you know, with like 4 cones, the way everything else on the planet sees it, you know.
And then the Parks and Recreation departments are going to lose a lot of business because nobody's going to be going in the damn park. Nobody's going to want to go anything.
I sometimes think about that, and I wonder about that because the realities, if explained properly, kind of show a track record that you can be killed by a salmon quicker. Like people are choking on more hot dogs. People actually were killed by their toilet more than even a bear last year. So like in-home accidents, like, so if we really educate people, the reality is they've been there the whole time watching you. You just haven't known it. So the only thing that's changed is now you know. And so you'll be a little more observant and a little more careful on your hike. But what's going to change? What? Because you know it, suddenly they're going to attack us? That's not it. That's not it. So I look at it and I say to myself, what we have to do is we have to educate, because when people have understanding, they have a little more solid, you know, they carry themselves with a little more understanding as well. And so their reactions are going to be a little more I over E. See, this is what we're trying to avoid, the E over I. Emotion over intellect invariably produces fight or flight. So that's what they're trying to get us all into. They want that. They want that. Critical thought requires unemotional evaluation. And so in the end, we have to begin educating people from those standpoints, because the reality of this is we've existed alongside them since they began covering up the information, and before that. And you know what I mean? I mean, there's records of these creatures going back thousands of years. It's just people don't want to listen to the cultures that lived with them, traded with them, mated with them.
I brought that up the other night. Yeah. Dave Politis had I think it was a 14 or 15 part series on it. And in the beginning, he was just reading old newspaper clippings from the 1500s. Yeah, you know, another hairy wild man was dealt with. He was found stealing livestock or something, or stealing, you know, whatever. And it was multiple stories. And it was, as a matter of fact, just like a bear came in. It was dealt with the same way. You know, a bunch of guys went out on horses or whatever, and you know, went after it and fought it or wrangled it or did what they did. And at one point, the powers that be decided we are not, we're not deemed worthy to know the truth. And why is that?
I think the hominoids represented a significant disruption to forward progress. I think there inevitably are humanitarian discussions that are going to be had. I mean, there are many different perspectives on life and existence and all these things in our country today. And the fact that public oversight has not afforded these discussions to the general public is, you know, in our opinion, that's, you're not in reality. You don't understand that
Right.
there's a capitalist agenda superseding the existence of anthropoids, other upright walking creatures. In fact, they're enormous. And so when we look at these things, it really does come down to, I think, a very disruptive discussion will begin. And it's the type of discussion that could literally lead to a more healed understanding of reality, right? Something that we understand. We have some guidelines now that we have to kind of take care of environments, because if we don't, we'll upset the super predators. So it's one of these situations where this discovery and the outlying discussions that will happen, I think, have the potential to create a much better environment here in the United States. And not only that, but I think about the reality of, the other side of this. What if nothing gets said? What if people don't have these, these realizations about the planet they live on, and the catastrophes begin? What does that look like when human beings are thrust into these environments looking for water because the electricity's off? Where are you going to get water when it runs out? Well, this is the spring belt here in Florida. We have an aquifer, right? So we're going to go to the spring. Well, my last film illustrates what's there waiting for you to come get a drink of water.
Yeah.
What do you think they're going to be doing when there's no wildlife left and no game? And basically every living thing needs electrolytes, right? Did you know human bodies are walking electrolyte bags?
Mm-hmm.
See, we need education on this, because for as many people as there are that aren't, entertaining any kind of a serious attitude about this, are
Right.
going to be dealing with this. And it's like they don't, it's like that thing in the beginning of the show I was talking about. We have this ability to push it off, to reserve judgment. That's belief. I'm going to reserve judgment on that. And in the end, we can't afford this, not with the solar cycles, where we're at with what the sun's pulling right now. Just waiting for an Earth facing hole, and a big, huge big blast of solar radiation is going to take the grid down. These things are all real, and they're happening. Otherwise, we wouldn't see what we're seeing all over the world, man. South America is being, like, for 3 years now, been getting torn up by cataclysm. You know what I mean?
I brought that up.
And it's not on our news. It's not on our news. None of it. We're not being shared, so I don't know. I look at it and it could go either way, buddy.
Let me ask you about that South America thing.
But, well, you're describing, reports that Politis was talking about. He's talking about the old days. He's talking about what will be again. This is what will be again. If the grid goes down and there's no electricity and fuel eventually, oh, it's crap. Horses are going to be a commodity again. You will run out of bullets eventually, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's going to be spears and all this crazy stuff. And you look at it, it's like, is that possible? This is the United States. Right. And we all run on electricity.
And you saw what happened when we ran out of toilet paper. Everybody lost their damn minds.
Yeah.
Could you imagine we lose everything else?
I have a funny story about that, man. The first day of the pandemic, Florida got shut down. And incidentally, it was the day that we were supposed to start 168. So we already had people coming to Florida, and they shut the state down. So it's like, what? People were driving from all over the place and flying off. So anyway, it was 6:45 in the morning, and I was like, I'm going to get a head start and try to grab, some necessities. And I wasn't the only one thinking that. There was 44,000 people at my grocery store. And when I walked in, there was cans rolling across the floor, and toilet paper was streaming through the air in this one aisle. One guy pulled the shirt over another guy's head and was right hooking him over toilet paper. It was nuts, dude. I just turned around and went back. Went back to my truck.
It's the same here. It's the same here. Any store in Philly, you don't even want to be anywhere near there.
Yeah, man.
And I'll never forget that. And I was commuting. I was living in Delaware, working here in Pennsylvania. So I was commuting 65 miles each way. And I loved it. No traffic because nobody was out, but there was nothing open. There was nothing to do. Oh, it was wild.
Yeah, man.
So I had a couple questions come in. Oh, real quick. Let's touch on this. How many I mean, just a guesstimate. How many different types? You got your Pacific Northwest. You got your patty types. You have your you're hearing about. I forget where it was. Arizona, the ones that look like a damn hyena or something. Like the faces with the long nose, but they don't call them dogmen. I don't know what they call them. I don't know if they were calling them the good way. It's possibly that maybe that's what they were referring to. But
we call them the refugees.
Really?
Yeah, man, they're the ancient refugees, man. There's a really freaky realization that you get when you start catching the different types that are hanging out together. And that realization is that something's going on with their DNA, right? I mean, how can these things be from the same family groups? Sure, there's 20 of them that look like this kind, but there's 6 or 7 different like things going on there. And, you know, there's some, like I said, you know, there's one in particular, the most recent one that we, you know, I've seen on film for, you know, the first time with any clarity. It's got a mohawk. It's got a mohawk. And so, you know, what are we dealing with? Like I said, I think we're dealing with refugees from the ancient times. And I think, you know, that I don't think that there's any way around that. What we've come to accept is that some of the ancient history that has been pulled, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Enki, those kind of things.
Right.
There's more corroboration in those stories for what we study than there is in any other information. You know, twisted facts in various historical coverage is, you know, they've removed a lot. So, but I would say that, you know, from the people that I've talked to, the dog man is out there, as you know, and if you're not unfamiliar with, we've had publicly eyewitnesses pass lie detector tests on national television about the dog man. So, you know, I put stock in eyewitnesses because I've been interviewing them since I was 16. So, you know, I've had a few, you know, that you go, yeah. You know, this one I'm not going to put any stock in. And then 2-3 years later, you catch something on film that's just like what this guy you thought was full of it. Right. And so it's like, wait a minute, you know, this is the same area I've been catching the regular Bigfoot on, and I catch this thing that looks like a troll, you know, and it's bigger. And so, yeah, there's a few kinds. I can't put a definitive number on it, but I can tell you I've seen 5 or 6 different. It appears to be like subtypes, not this one's bigger and it's the same thing. They appear to have drastically different skull structures than in between each other, you know. And while there is a constant in many of the individuals, and they just look like smaller versions of these bigger ones, some of these types, you know, you don't see many of them, and they're big. Right. They're a lot bigger than what people think Bigfoot are. And I know, you know, that part of the investigation we're still documenting on, so I won't get into too much of that. But I would say that, you know, we've documented probably 5 or 6 different subtypes of these things. The curious thing is, like I said, is they're hanging out together as though the DNA and the things that Dr. Ketchum says about the DNA is accurate, that they can have many different types of expression, you know what I mean? And the way that they express, because they have this DNA that's strange, that there's things in the DNA that human beings typically don't see associating with each other, right? They say there's a chromosome difference. Well, that's an inclination that ancient science was real. If there's a creature that's a combined hybrid or a chimera, let's use that, chimera, right? Yeah. It can only happen one way. Well, there are ancient texts talking about genetic experience and how they created chimeras using the exact word. So, you know what I mean? It's like, I started looking at this stuff and it's like, well, you know, how far are we really from what, you know, those ancient texts like the Bible, the Old Testament, all that stuff? You know, like I said, in looking at the studies, there are so many different versions of that Old Testament. And when you seek down that thread of investigation, invariably you end at those stone tablets, because the stories are very similar to the extent that it almost seems as though the stories have been hijacked by modern humans and twisted to meet agenda. Because what we're hearing in the original stories are, that it's something about extraterrestrials and genetic experimentation in the pursuit of saving their home planet. And all of this, it goes on and on and on and on and on. And I have to tell you that from the study and the 10 years in the field, that those are the only correlations that we have.
Okay. So, 2 questions from another podcaster. She's real big into UFOs and such. So, 2 things. Is it, one, do you think they're physical creatures, or do you believe the quote unquote woo aspect of them being interdimensional?
Well, I look at data, and so and in my own experiences, right? Because that's data too, right. And it can be subjective in emotional situations and all that. So that's why we record, right? So we have our backup. So regardless of emotionality or whatever's going on during the footage, we know what it is that's happening, right? So when I look at those things, and was she looking for like specifics on this, or like?
I think it's just a generalization. Do you think they're do you think they're a flesh and blood creature, or are they?
All right. So what we see in the data and what we experience is very natural. It's, I can track him and follow him, and so I know he walked, and I know that the bushes are made into a way that's impossible for me to get through it. So I'm seeing manipulation, all these things. So obviously, from the scientific perspective, I see a natural being. But I also see the same phenomenon that is unexplainable that interacts with human beings, interacting with these creatures while we're out there studying in the forest. So what does that mean? Well, I know that the unidentified flying object thing, and I'm talking about something that nobody knows exists, is real. Or we don't understand what it is. It's real. I've seen things with my own 2 eyes, and I've been involved in cases investigating UFOs. I understand this, that we live in this special world. And I don't honestly think that we have enough data that suggests that the creatures are involved in it to any other extent like we are. We don't understand what it is, and I think that based on our data, it would be ludicrous for us to think that the creatures understand what it is, given that we don't have enough information to say that. I've seen these things. Now, with all that being said, I've seen these things around the creatures. I have seen lights in the forest at this point, finally. I have seen orbs are real, and they are around these creatures. I have seen UFOs in my research area with military personnel present to witness the whole thing. In fact, we were using their military technology to see the UFOs. And that was after 7 years of being in the research area, having my cameras jammed, missing time on a few occasions, coming out confused, not being able to find my truck when it's in a parking lot that I've been to 8,000 times. So there is something going on. I hear stories from the UFO community on over the last 25 years about being blanked out, eyewitnesses, people describing being taken on ships, all of these things. We all realize that people are providing more than enough anecdote for this. We also hear the anecdote from modern humans that they have trouble remembering it, right? So is something being done? Yeah, we all think something's being done, whether it's the electromagnetic power plant that powers the craft that stirs our brains into Kool-Aid and we can't remember what's going on, whatever it ends up being, why wouldn't it affect the creatures the same way? That's where I lean now. So I'm more on the side of, based on the data, that the creatures are just standing there and they're picking their noses, and I have pictures of a shiny line running out of his nose. And I have more than enough pictures of the creatures with scowls and changing expressions. And then disappearing into the forest, you know, like, but I went back there and there's his tracks. You know what I mean? So
You're getting some feedback again.
I'm not.
Yeah, your mic was giving a little bit of feedback again.
Okay. Is that a little better?
That's still doing it. So can you maybe try to bring it down? Man, you know what? Try to bring it down just like one little smidge. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
How's that better? Is that on the
So, nah, it's like you're talking and I'm hearing like something over.
Yeah.
Hold on one second. He just messaged me. Unplug your microphone. All right, now I guess tell him to plug it back in. Okay, that's not feedback. That's the microphone plug itself. Try maybe putting it in, maybe, you know, finagle that. Can't hear you. Oh, you're muted.
All right, so I'm on.
Yeah, just when we're getting into this stuff.
How about now? You get
Beautiful.
anything? Okay.
Nothing.
I just unplugged my microphone and I'm going off the computer's audio now. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, much better. That was weird.
So yeah, to put a finer point on it, we don't think, based on our information and our experiences, that they're anything but earthlings that live in the bushes and have very simple existence that involves quite a bit of violence when they eat meat. You know, though they're relatively peaceful creatures, they don't seem to initiate any kind of aggression towards us unless I initiate it. If I initiate it, they respond in that degree, which is really telling. They're not trying to harm us. So in looking at it, with the fact that we've been running experiments where when we don't actually tell people where we're going, or we introduce misdirection and we still catch the creatures on film,
yeah,
that there's no interference, that they're natural. And we've done those experiments dozens of times just in the last 2 years. Then I'll go to a place where it's been announced that I'm going to be there, and my cameras go down and do all this stuff. And we don't get to catch the creatures on film, but it's more about what we've been catching on film and what we've been seeing. The UFOs, which doesn't necessarily mean extraterrestrial, and the Tic Tac devices, which are obviously some type of satellite or radio controlled device. We literally, after that incident where I was missing time, 2 of our campers, my wife being one of them and another guy by the name of Lee, both witnessed what appeared to be privately dressed military personnel or black ops personnel wearing black uniforms, carrying black briefcases, coming out of the same trees on the opposite side. So we park on this side and go in. We're engaging with the creatures. Our cameras get jammed. My truck gets in I have all this problems with my truck ever since this.
Right. Yeah.
And then when we leave, we're driving around the other side and there's personnel leaving with cases out of the forest, getting in a black truck. So like we're witnessing what we think is going on here. And the fact that, like I said, when we don't announce and I go through great pains to conceal where and when I'm going to be, I don't have any supernatural problems. So is it supernatural? Or is it just black budget stuff like Rumsfeld was talking about 12 years ago? Are there known unknowns? You know, there's like all this stuff. They're spending $10 trillion. What do we know? Where'd it go? You know what I mean? And to boot, one of their factories is in the nucleus of my entire research area. Northrop Grumman sits squarely in the middle of all of my research areas. And guess what? They own the patents to the little craft. We looked it up. So we put all this together.
Yeah.
And it really does continuously point at these creatures being more natural. I hope that answers.
More natural, and being managed, as we said earlier, either by them or so now let me go on their other question here. Are you familiar with any of the mantis theory?
No.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard stories about.
You talking about the aliens that are like Manus?
That's what I would suppose.
Oh, well, yeah, I've heard about that kind of stuff. I'm not familiar with any eyewitnesses.
Right.
Now, I've heard about it, and I've seen the people on TV talk about that type. But
same.
Though I will say this,
from.
I have seen things in the woods that, as of yet, I will not. I'm working on something right now in one spot that I've been tracking this thing, and I don't know what this thing is, man. I don't know what it is. It's not a Bigfoot, and I don't know what the hell this thing is, and who knows what we're going to see. At this point, I don't. All bets are off. Where we think we understand. You get into this and you think you understand some things, and then you realize, wow, everybody's way off here. And then you start going on these like threads based on what happens and what you film and all this. And where I'm at now is, man, it wouldn't surprise me if a 400-foot dinosaur came out of the ocean and tore up Miami. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I'm literally at the point now where in my investigation, man, I'm flabbergasted with, what we're actually seeing repetitively. It'd be one thing if the data that I shot was a one-time occurrence. You could chalk it up to pareidolia because that stuff's real, right? People make things up all the time. But that's not what's happening here, man. And we have a track record of being able to show you what's going on. I mean, when you see me walking along and you're watching the footage and I'm walking, and then all of a sudden the camera stops and it zooms in on the other side of the bank and you can see the creature. What are we talking about? It's more a question of, well, I don't believe that's real. Well, yeah. You know what I mean? Go get another Starbucks, man. I got this. You know what I'm saying? I don't have time for it. This is real and it's frightening. And I hope that people take this information and not with a grain of salt, because I got news for you. Whether we like it or not, the Earth's going to do what it's going to do. And they live here. So at some point, we're going to find out, all of us. And that's, Mel and I sit and we're like, what is that going to look like? Well, it depends on what happens and how it comes out. I mean,
I think it's legit.
Is it Miami? Is that what happened in Miami?
Right.
Are they spinning it? Because the initial report from Miami that I actually read didn't say nothing about aliens, bro. Talked about 10-foot hairy creatures that were gray. Well, that's what I studied. 10-foot hairy creatures that are gray. Exactly. 2 days later, it was UFOs were involved.
Yeah.
Which is, if you ask me, a governmental spin to make it ridiculous. But where are they? I went and looked, and all out in front of that mall, all the way down that coastline, is a protected preserve. And it's big enough to hold creatures. Now, I found that most of these preserves have these creatures in it. Why would you want to stop developing Miami on the most valuable piece of land in Miami? Yeah, let's make it a preserve. Give me a break. There's a reason behind why they lock up valuable dry land in South Florida. And it ain't got nothing to do with a tortoise.
Yeah.
I'm saying it, So.
Those areas, I mean, they lock them up. You can't get in. I mean, do you hear stories about people getting in there and coming out with wild tales, or not coming out at all? I mean.
Yeah, I mean, every one of these areas, like the Everglades, I mean, this is all miniaturized versions of the other Everglades all through that area, So you're going to get the dry spots within it. It looks flooded, but you're going to have these dry canopies. And that's the thing. Like, people are like, oh, that's nothing, man. Right. But it says right on it, wildlife management area, which means there's wildlife in it. And if it's got wildlife in it, it can hold deer and it can hold hogs and it can hold all this, then it can hold the top of the food chain. It doesn't matter if it's 3,000 square feet. You know what I mean? Because the bottom line is, they don't, it's like, I think there's this thing where people started to study and they get this they're migratory, and they're, you know, they need a lot of room because they're really big and all this stuff. But they're anthropoids, and you know, they're of the Homo class, right? So they're hominoids. How much room do you need, man? My refrigerator's 12 feet from me, bro. You know what I'm saying? And so when we really look at it, as long as nobody's going in there and the game keeps replenishing, there's no reason for them to leave. Their existence is contradictory to ours. They're not trying to take it all. They're just in there being.
Just doing their thing.
Yeah. And you'll get reports. You know, I took a report one time from Boca. This is the account that I was talking about that I didn't believe. And I told the guy, open that shit online, man. Come on.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I saw the creature. He had video of it. I thought, okay, this guy's running a hoax on me because this thing looks like it belongs in Dr. Seuss. Well, I didn't realize that's 75% of them, you know? I just started catching those guys on film in the last 5 years. And I had to, like, you know, go back and really look at this. And I tried to find a guy's number. But where he saw the creature, it was in town. It was in town, and he had video. He was riding his mountain bike with his wife, and then all of a sudden it came stumbling out of these trees, cracking branches. And he looked over. He already had his cell phone out, was filming his wife, and he just filmed the thing as it stumbled through. He said it looked like it had a fever. It was sweating real bad and didn't look right. You know, the way it was walking, it was all like, you know, stumbling and shit. I don't know. You know, I just know I've caught those exact creatures on film. Real high forehead, real high bald. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever seen, man. But you know something? It looks exactly like the same creature David Shealy filmed that he has the picture of that's running, and you see it has a high forehead and that hair flap is like flapping back. This creature had that hair flap, had like a calic in the front. It looked ridiculous. I thought, this is ridiculous. I saw the video. I swear to God, I was like, this is ridiculous. Then it turns out like half of them are bald, half of them have balding patches. You know what I mean? Like you see all kinds of like worn out junk on these creatures, man. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, they're not all of them are going to be, you know, prime age. I mean, they've been through battles and wars and whatever, and maybe some they spent their life sick, or you know, you don't know. You don't
I
know
personally have caught those balding guys on film. I saw one of them firsthand, man, and he's like me, man. He's bald, and then his hair. It's funny because the hair in the back of his head comes up to a point, but it doesn't come off the top. His head's bald, and then he's got hair like, you know how tailback wears the pads.
Right.
Yeah, he's got like tailback hair. It's off the back of his head. And I know that because when he turned his head and was jabbering at I guess another one, I looked at his profile. I was like, that dude looks ridiculous, man. But he's about 9 feet tall. He's huge, you know. And he was jabbering on, and there were other ones there with him, you know. They were just in the bushes, you know. Crazy.
We have a question from the chat. I'll bring it up for you. I have a serious question. What do you all think about sound frequency programming or jamming? Like the government downs our natural sounds on purpose and sending signals to reprogram our minds in our sleep.
Frequencies, you know, control our existence, and we're unaware of it. Magnetic frequencies, radio frequencies, you know, the planet's frequencies. We're just now starting to get information on all of this. The government's been studying it for like 60 years. But the reality of this is that I honestly do, you know, think that, you know, there's frequency at work here. When you have camera difficulties, it's frequency. When you have disorientation, it's frequency, whether it's magnetic or radio or whatever it ends up being. But, you know, there's definitely something going on. And, you know, are they trying to do that on a mass scale in America?
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, I don't know. You know, I just know frequency is dominant. And to the extent that as I've aged, I've become more sensitive to it. And I know that because it can trigger certain autonomic functions in my body, and it does on a daily basis. You know, if I hear,
I mean, we're on our own frequency. Yeah. I said, we as humans, we're on our own frequency level. You know, I mean, isn't that, I mean, everything has its, the other thing is, you know, your phone. everybody says it, you don't have the phone on, you're talking to somebody, you turn the phone on and it brings the topic up you were just talking about. Why is that? Is that another one of the government's, and all that's just pointed at ads, revenue, and directing certain people in certain areas to do, hopefully do certain things or whatever.
So one of the things that we're doing now to combat that is we started doing and practicing like grounding. We have to combat this. I mean, there were discussions for years about 5G, and now it's like, what? It's no big deal, huh? So it's just, they just frog in boiling water and keep stepping you up, and you get consistently more ill as it goes along. But grounding is one thing that I recommend. My wife and I are engaged in that. I have a grounding pad that I sleep on that a friend of ours just turned us on to that, I'm kind of excited about. I've had 2 nights sleep on this thing, and I feel different, when I sleep. And we turn the Wi-Fi off at night. We're making, when we're not using it, if it's not being used and we're doing, something where we want to have normalcy, you can turn it off, and it's subtle, but you do notice a difference. You know what I mean? And it didn't used to be that way. Like right now, it's interesting to me that biblically we hear that frequencies will be used to identify the coming of certain things, right? Like we're talking about these big horns that get blown. Well, that's frequency, buddy. Right. And I got news for you. There are certain frequencies that are controlling me right now. They trigger me to go to the bathroom, high frequencies, right? So like the older I get, like if a certain frequency hits, I got to run to the bathroom. I'm carrying groceries in and my keys are jingling. I got to run to the bathroom. Like, this is ridiculous. Right. You know what I mean? But I'm seeing evidence that human beings, we can be controlled by this. So, what is this in the future? How does this, affect what's going on, and how does it affect the creatures? Is it intentional? I think those are all really good questions, but scientifically, a mountain trying to explain, you know what I mean?
When did 5G go online? Do you know roundabout?
Well, I think it was more about because nobody really wanted it. They found 2 or 3 who accept it, and then slowly, and then they're going to try to spread it like, Empentago on your arm or something. But the reality I'm just wondering, they couldn't get it nationwide. They couldn't get it nationwide. Right. Our community won't allow fiber optics. So we're not going to get 5G. Our community, literally, town commissioners voted and said, no, we don't want all this frequency in our city. We don't want this. You're going too fast.
I wonder if there's a reason behind that, because of, like your topic you're studying, where you're at. Maybe there's somebody in the know that says, no, you don't want that here. You do not want that here.
It's possible. I know if you look on a frequency map where you're going to look at cell signal and satellite signal, you'll see a blank hole over my research areas.
Wow.
Blank hole.
See, that's
you get no signal. I mean, you go in my research area, you could be walking and talking on the phone, and then suddenly no. And then encounter one of these creatures and have a camera there and record the whole thing, and then the thing actually gets you before you get back to your truck, and your camera won't have any footage on it. None. We have to use, like I said, specialized metal encased cameras in order to get you any footage. If you've seen footage in the last 3.5 years, it's because we've been using specialized equipment and misdirecting about where and when.
Right.
Because I can't get footage out of the bushes anymore. Not with the company that seems to be following me around.
That's insane. It really is. It's and then we were also
the general public they don't realize that's the frustrating thing. Like, I'm sitting here telling you this, but just try to imagine how much effort I've put into this hundreds of times, where I've literally stood there, and the counter I was talking about, where the one was talking and I could see him talking to another one, and he turned and I saw his profile. I filmed the whole thing. The memory card's right here. You can't get the footage off. It's unrecognizable format. It's crystal clear. 3 clips. I threw up after I shot this footage, and I almost didn't get my window down fast enough because I got in my truck and tried to run because I thought he was going to come. He just looked really scary. But the footage is, it says every time I access, this card is ruined too. You can't use the memory card. It won't initialize. And the footage, 3 clips, 4K, 60 frames per second. The first clip was dog shit, admittedly so, because I was freaking out. But the second clip, I was sniper breathing, man. My camera shot perfect 4K of this creature, and I can't access it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you want to talk about aggravating?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This footage will end all debates worldwide, and I can't get it. And you can see the thumbnails on it. You can see that the clips are there, all 3 of them. I couldn't even believe what happened that day. But, you know, I'm still, like I said, you know, it's like when the magnetic stuff starts happening, you don't know, you know, it's like, you know, am I going to get out of here? And am I going to get out of here with a record? You know, or are they going to find my camera and not me? And then the memory card has 3 clips that can't be examined. And this is, you know, this is what, when we talk about management, that's how the species is being managed from our side. When you identify these creatures and you identify the where and the when you need to be there, and you go public with it, it won't be long before you have a shadow, whoever they are.
Yeah. It's, I mean, it's true. It's true. It's happening. And what are you going to do? Are you going to fight the government? I mean,
you'd have to know who they are first.
Right. You know? Yeah. It's probably not even the regular damn government.
They're personally responsible for about $6,000 worth of damage. And you can bet your ass I want all of it back. I'm after them. That's plain and simple. You know what I mean? If you present that tool that you use around my cameras, I'm going to catch it on film again. And rest assured, at some point, people will be spoken to with all this evidence that we have who can do something about it. You know what I mean? Exactly. I'm pretty sure if Ron DeSantis knew that his civilian population was living in such close proximity to what could ultimately destroy every family in the community, he'd be concerned about it. But there's a concerted effort to keep me from there, you know, to keep this study broke, to keep people not talking about it. You have tried to share my work before, man. You know what's going on.
Yeah. And then there was a time you had the film crew that went in with you, and they could not get permits.
That's right.
To film where you film.
That's the history.
You and I can just you and I can just walk in there and film, and it is what it is. I mean, sure, you're going to get deterred, but
that was
legally
3 months ago.
They have to.
You know, 3 months ago, the History Channel tried to pull permits to come in the field with me. And they were basically told over and over and over again, we can't find the person that would okay those permits. That's the excuse they were given for weeks. And all they're doing is promoting Florida's conservation areas, right? Because there's no such thing as these creatures, right? So why aren't they getting permits? I mean, what are they going to do?
How big is the office you went into to get the permits? I'm sure it's not.
I wasn't responsible for any of that. The office, I can tell you how big the office is if you have to go there, but you can pull the permits online. The History Channel has to go about a different process because they're a professional organization and they're, you know, going to be making money off the production and doing all these things. So in the end, they have to call offices and get in touch with people, and it all has to be more official with official recognition that they're going to be in the area, right? They were unable to do that to go in the field with me. And it's my understanding that there was no logical or rational explanation. Basically, they were denied due process.
Right.
Yeah.
It's such bullshit. It really is. You know?
Yeah, and I think about what could have happened to promote the truth had I been able to take the History Channel in the field with me. It wouldn't have took 1 or 2 tries, and they would have been around them. And who knows what would have happened? You know what I mean? It's like we could be educating millions of people right now on what's coming, and we're not.
Well, I mean, hopefully my 15 eyes on it now will put it out, get it out there to other people. I mean, I get a lot of views after the live. I get, people come in, check it out. I'm hoping this one definitely gets some traction because it's got to get out there.
Well, I put it out on my sites, and you know, I mean, I'm going to share as much as I can, and I always try to share. And you know, any help you need in the future with any of this kind of stuff, you just let me know. You know, I'm happy
Yeah,
to help.
absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and thank you for all your support. You know, I mean, really,
yeah, dude.
you know, a lot of people engage with the subject, but you know, they don't want to take it that next step, which is, you know, participating in actually understanding and in research that's, you know, forwarding the needle. And so for taking the next step and becoming active, I commend you on that. I salute everybody that gets active about this, you know.
Well, I'll be down Florida. I'm not sure when. I know I got to hit California, but I'll be down there. I'll be in the like Palm Harbor area, and then I like to link up with you because I think you're only about 100 miles from there, right? So it's like Tampa, yeah, about 100 miles.
Well, we've always got expeditions, you know, and if you're in town, man, you're more than welcome to come with us. You know, I don't have any qualms.
Yeah, absolutely.
With, you know, taking people in.
Absolutely.
We had a hostile takeover attempted over the course of the last 2.5 years of our research areas by other researchers, and so we had to go public to let people know, you know, where we've been researching, because there's like a massive underground theft of our like work, and like, you know, people are like trying to do all this unethical stuff in our research areas, and so I just went public with it to ensure that people understand, look, this is where we've been for 10 years. And we've been trying to tell you what's going on here. If other people are going in here and starting other explanations and all this stuff, then they need to have documentation that they're going to, you know, that the contradictions exist. Because what we're not going to do is have a bunch of people go in, do nothing, and come out with nothing, and then act like we aren't doing something. And that's really what's, you know, what they've been trying to do is they're trying to undermine what is plainly visible in our work and the realities that, you know, we're facing. And I look at it, it's like, you know, their little management plan, if you think it doesn't extend to your consciousness, you're remiss. And so in the end, that's what this is all about. They're managing me so they can manage your perspectives on this subject. And that's what you need to know. We're getting constantly held back so that you are getting constantly held back, and in
shaping the information.
We have to work together, you know.
Yeah, and it's basically they're shaping the information that's being out. They're shaping the information in the research that you put out, so they're only seeing it in a certain light.
That's right.
Real quick, Prince Gratz has a question. Simple, but it's his favorite cryptid, Mothman. Real or not? Have you ever done any research on it?
Well, I mean, there's eyewitnesses, you know what I mean? And anytime there's eyewitnesses, you got to do a proper investigation. I haven't had a chance to do that, but eyewitnesses carry quite a bit of veracity. And with the amount of information that's on that, and as many people who have seen it, I'm inclined to think that there's something going on there. So
yeah,
what it is, we're calling it Mothman, but who knows what it is? I mean, you know, what does it end up, you know, being? Is it, you know, some kind of weird deity or something? I don't know. Is it an alien? You know, I mean, this is the kind of thing. What I'd like to see is footage. I want to see some footage of it. And I mean, like, you know, somebody do what's necessary to investigate it and then catch it on film, because it can be accomplished. It's just a question of sacrifice. Are you willing to sacrifice it to get the information? And that's really what it comes down to, you know. But I think there's something to it. You know, did the bridge fall because of him? That's where people start stretching. People lose me in that stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like here, John says he saw this thing on the bridge. There are other eyewitnesses that said they saw this thing on the bridge. But the bridge falling, now we're all getting into, you know what I mean? That's where I think that's where the ridiculousness takes it to where people stop thinking about it. How convenient.
Trying to pull something up here. Scott Carpenter, rest in peace, Scott. He did a ton of work for this field, ton of work. He's one of the first ones to catch, you know, a white hominid on film, and he had it because of the gimbal that was turned around on the gyro that was facing behind him. So a lot of times, you know, you're catching these things. because they don't think you're looking at them. I mean, that's how intelligent they are. I don't know if they know what the hell, cameras are. I don't know if they know what it, you hear stories that people say, when I looked at them, that's when he turned around. Like it feels you looking directly at them. I was mentioning this the other day on one of my pods. It's like, when somebody's standing behind you and they're staring at you intently, you feel it, you turn around, did they kind of get that? I mean, with the cameras, I mean, is it, or do they just recognize the equipment now?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, like as far as the jamming goes, we're of the mind that it's technology. So where the creatures are concerned, what we see is that we don't have technology issues where the creatures are concerned. So I have plenty of footage where I'm walking and this thing's laying there and the camera's in my hand. You know what I mean? It's like I'm walking through. I think that, yeah, there's a situation that happens when they get that we're about them, and they're kind of, well, he's like trying to get me. You know what I mean? He's trying to see me. He's trying to communicate with me. He thinks I'm here. And what we see in those situations is they have the tendency to appear in the footage quite a bit initially. So when we go into a situation where it's a brand new area and I start speaking Native American and making sounds that I know these creatures make, they get curious and they're looking, but then they don't want, they're like, well, why is he, you can see that it triggers something where they want to watch. Yeah. But it doesn't affect our spirituality or anything like that. What we've been in the bushes with them, and yeah, you get terrified, but we didn't have anything happen with our cameras. It was the game cameras, and then it was when the technology was around. And so I wonder about that, because I have stood there on many occasions and they've been within 20 feet of us, and you don't hear anybody talking in your head. You don't, like, I've never heard any of that stuff, and I can show you that we've been there. I mean, here's the creature, you know what I mean? And it's like, we don't get that thing they talk about, mind speak. We don't get the popping in and out. Suddenly he's there, then he vanishes, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's always, he cut back into the tree line and I saw the stationary band of diffusion hit his shoulder, and it's called shadow. You know what I mean? That's what we think it is. But it has color, and that's the part people don't understand. So when the shadow hit the Bigfoot, it wasn't a shadow. It was green. But if we walk in it and we're looking at it, it's just a darker area. So we're always with this human limitation and having to remember and keep this in our consciousness when we're in the field researching. Else we fall prey to science fiction. See, this is what continues to happen to people. They're accepting this science fiction when the reality is like, I was stating, we have this diffusion that we can't see. And so the more that we look into our own limitations and really as researchers begin to study the power of achromatic aberration, the more we'll realize that this information that we're giving you guys is on. And it really is just a question of, do I have the time or the willingness, and am I willing to look into this? Because if I am, I will fully understand how that thing vanished into those trees when it was obviously, it just looked like it changed into the trees and went in.
Yeah.
It's like, I watched it, man. I saw it. But the reality of it is like we go back to the bonefish. The bonefish is gray. So the retransmission is not as potent as coming off the white canvas or the truly colorless, bright colorless canvas, right? The effect is startling. I did a video where I took this one video. I don't know where I got this video, but there's a white card that's shiny, and it represents the creature's skin. And there's a blue light being shown on the wall. And when you move that white card into that blue light, it vanishes. You can't even hardly see the edges of it. It's the exact color of the blue light. When you move it back out, it's white again. This is exactly what's happening to the creatures. Yep. But it's different colors, right? Because it's the forest, not a blue projector. You take the dark card, that's the color blue already, and you put it in the blue light, and it gets darker blue. So there are aspects, and this is literally how we learned to gauge the actual skin tones of the creatures. The darker creatures will show up darker in the shadow, right? But the lighter creatures will appear to vanish and look exactly like the color. So all it does is remove the symmetry and your ability to say there's a 9-foot hominoid standing there. Then all of a sudden the canopy starts moving and the diffusion gets broke up by the moving branches, and there's a 9-foot hominoid standing there because the retransmission isn't occurring. And it does come down to these scientific factors.
It's wild. It's wild. And it's just, you know, and, you know, if you don't know, like most people don't, I had no clue until, you know, I watched some of your stuff and followed it. And, you could have walked by them 1,000 times. You wouldn't know it because you just don't know what to look for. And you don't know to look for the symmetry. And you're thinking of looking for a head this big and, you know, maybe it's that fucking big, you know, and that's the other surprise. Yeah. So your mind can't wrap around it, you know, and that's why most people, it's impossible because that's just the way, it's just the way they were taught, the way they learned, the way they lived. You know, they've never been told anything else.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the problem of getting acceptance.
That was the hardest part of this whole thing. And, you know, just, you know, if we're going to close down here, I want to leave you guys with this, right?
Yeah.
It's about you. It's about us. It's not about it's like, yeah, we're trying to understand them. But in order to do that, you have to understand yourself first, and especially your physical limitations. If we don't understand what we're capable of, we can't fully understand how to accomplish this. And by studying ourselves and scientifically how we're limited as human beings, we've advanced our study. And so I always recommend look in the mirror, look at what you dismiss, go and see if there's evidence. Don't just casually dismiss it, because whether you realize it or not, this has something to do with you, and it will in the future. So.
And with that, read your tagline, which I love so fucking much. That is, when people do follow your work, they're going to see it. That's it's so damn true. And I can't deliver, but only you can.
My tagline?
Your tagline at the bottom of the screen. Well, right under me on the screen here. Not your tagline, but
you know,
okay.
No, well,
I
it's
love
a fact.
Sign off.
It is a fact. Giants are real.